Today we're going to dig into one of those super specific, kind of frustrating moments. You know the one. You give a system a clear, simple fact, and it just seems to completely ignore you. Well, we're going to explain why it's not actually ignoring you. It's doing something totally different. It's filling in the blanks. So, have you had this happen? You provide one single clear fact, and you just expect the system to use it. But then, it doesn't. It honestly feels like you've just been ignored. But the reason this happens, well, it's probably not what you think. All right, first things first, let's just get this out of the way. Your expectation is completely 100% reasonable. It's based on the fundamental rules of how we as humans communicate with each other every single day. I mean, think about it. When we talk to each other, the details are everything. If I tell you a friend of mine is a doctor, you use that specific fact. You don't just decide to swap it out for lawyer because, hey, maybe you know more lawyers. The specific context we give each other, well, that's the foundation for any real understanding. You know, there's actually a whole field of linguistics dedicated to this very idea. It's called pragmatics, and it's all about studying how the situation, the context, our shared understanding, all of that shapes the actual meaning of what we say. It's like the unwritten rule book for conversation. So, our entire life experience has taught us this one simple rule. When we give someone a specific fact, it should be heard and it should be used. We just expect that new detail to be treated as the most important piece of information in that moment. And that, right there, is our reasonable expectation. And this is exactly where the confusion starts. Because that solid, totally reasonable expectation, it gets broken. And we're just left kind of scratching our heads, wondering, what in the world just happened? So let's look at what's going on in a real, concrete moment. You give the system one clear, simple fact. For this example, let's just say you're asking it to summarize a single sentence. Super straightforward. Okay, look at this. You explicitly stated that Jane Smith founded the recycling program. But the summary that comes back, it replaces that fact. It claims she's known for improving city parks. So your detail wasn't just missed, it was completely written over. And this brings us right to the central question of this entire explainer. Why? Why would it throw away a perfectly good fact that you literally just handed to it and then invent a new one? It feels completely illogical, almost defiant. But believe it or not, there's a really clear reason for it. The answer isn't that the system decided to ignore you. Nope. It was busy doing something else entirely. It was filling in the blanks. To really get this, we need to borrow a concept from psychology called a schema. You can think of a schema as a kind of mental blueprint or a pattern of ideas about a specific topic. We all have them. You have a schema for what a library is or what a birthday party usually involves. And these mental shortcuts, they're incredibly useful. They let us navigate the world without having to figure absolutely everything out from scratch every single time. When you walk into an office, for example, your office schema just kind of clicks on and you already know what to expect. And this is just brilliant. It perfectly shows how powerful these schemas can be. In a really famous study, people were asked to wait for a few moments in a room that was set up to look exactly like a professor's study. Later, when they were asked what was in the room, lots of them confidently remembered seeing books. The catch? There were 0 books in that room. Their academic study schema was just so strong that it filled in the blank with the most expected item. So you see, our minds don't just record details like a camera. They activate a pattern, that schema, and then they fill in the gaps with whatever's most probable, what's expected to be there. And right here, this is the connection. The system works on a very, very similar principle. Now, it doesn't have memories or beliefs or anything like that, but what it does have is its own version of schemas, these incredibly powerful statistical patterns that it learned from just enormous amounts of text. Okay, so let's apply this to our Gene Smith example. When the system sees the word mayor, that single word activates its strongest statistical pattern for that whole concept. And in all its data, the idea that is most commonly glued to mayor is improving city parks, not founding a recycling program. So the system just fills in the blank with the most probable information from its pattern, overwriting the actual fact you provided. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like a mistake, right? Like something that needs to be fixed. But this behavior is actually the result of a really fundamental design choice. Yeah, in a very real sense, this pattern completion ability isn't an error. You could say it's the core feature that allows the system to function in the first place. It's what lets it generate fluent, coherent-sounding text on pretty much any topic you throw at it. And this is the trade-off. By relying on these strong pre-existing patterns, the system gains incredible speed and fluency. It can create text that sounds natural and, generally makes sense. But what's lost in that trade-off is precision, especially with new single facts that don't quite fit the strongest pattern. It's really optimized for general coherence, not for the pinpoint accuracy of one specific detail. So let's bring all this back around and hopefully resolve that initial confusion once and for all. The problem is, our intuition, which has been built up over a lifetime of human conversations, it just completely fails us in this situation. We expect a brand new detail to automatically become the most important piece of information. The fundamental mismatch here was really in our mental model. We walked into it expecting a conversation, with a partner who values context. But the system wasn't doing that at all. It was engaged in a totally different task. It was just completing the most probable pattern it knew. So in the end, it was kind of a battle between two pieces of information. The one, new fact that you provided, and the deeply, deeply ingrained statistical pattern it had for the word mayor. And in this kind of system, the strongest, most established pattern, well, it won. So the next time something like this happens, you'll understand what's really going on under the hood. The system wasn't ignoring your fact, it was actually overwriting it by filling in the blank with its own strongest pattern. And that explains why the system behaved that way.